This morning, terrible timing with an announcement from Governor Abbott.
Why in the world would you put that out during Black History Month? That's a hell of a sensitivity to the issue.
State Senator Royce West there from the Capitol. Border arrests are down significantly right now, but the Texas National Guard wants $500 million more for their mission there. State Senator Kelly Hancock on the changing situation along the Rio Grande. The state of the state. Governor Abbott lays out emergency legislation he wants prioritized and passed. State Rep Trey Martinez Fischer with the Democratic response. And 2 years now after the deadly February freeze of 2021, lawsuits are piling up. But will anyone really be held accountable?
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Jason Whiteley, and lots is happening at the state capitol right now, so let's begin there. We do have a better idea of what this legislative session is now going to look like over the next 3.5 months. Governor Abbott named 7 emergency items that lawmakers can begin considering right now. Among them are using the budget surplus to lower this state's sky-high property taxes. And also, he wants to create education savings accounts so parents can use tax dollars to educate their child however they see fit. Along the southern border, arrests of undocumented immigrants, they are down 40%, and that's the lowest level in 2 years. A new Biden administration policy might be the reason for it. It allows people seeking asylum, if they are from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, they can only come into the U.S. if they apply for that asylum in their home countries rather than here. Republican Senator John Cornyn says Biden's policy is artificially lowering the numbers and is not a real solution. And Senator Ted Cruz says he's not going to run for president in 2024. He's only going to run for re-election to his Senate seat. Cruz has hinted at this for a while now, but he told supporters this for sure in a phone call the other day, according to the Dallas Morning News. Cruz, though, has barely registered in the presidential polls so far. He's near the bottom of the pack with single digits. Let's start now with what some state lawmakers call terrible timing on the governor's part. This month, Governor Abbott told state agencies and state universities to stop considering diversity when looking for new employees. They must only hire on merit, Abbott said. Well, that order infuriated Black and Latino lawmakers. This morning, State Senator Royce West from his office at the Capitol, he's talking about that issue and why he does not think that school choice is likely to pass this session.
Senator West, welcome back to the program. Governor Abbott told state universities and state agencies that they cannot consider diversity anymore when hiring, that they have to hire based on merit alone. A number of minorities in the legislature have come out against this. These are all Democrats in the minority politically in Austin. What does this fight look like? Because I've heard time after time that you guys want to fight this, but I'm curious what that physically will look like.
Well, first of all, timing's everything. I want you to think about this. Why in the world, and I think it just kind of gets down to people who advise the governor, why in the world would you put that out during Black History Month? That's a hell of a sensitivity to the issue, okay? Why would you put it out the same day or the day after we dedicate a portrait to Opal Lee here in the Senate chambers? That's a lot of sensitivity. Why in the world would you tell an agency to do something that they should be doing in the first place, hiring based on merit? The DEI is not just hiring someone because they're Black or they're Hispanic, whatever the case is. It's broadening the pool of people that can be considered by an agency. All of us know that discrimination is illegal. That's what we've been fighting about for all these many years. Quit discriminating.
Well, what do you think his timing was for? Why make the move now in the middle of Black History Month, right after Opal Lee was down there as well, getting honored by the legislature?
Jason, you've asked a question I've asked myself. Why would he do that during this particular time as opposed to some other time? And then on top of that, why would he tell agencies to do what they're already supposed to be doing? Okay. I think that his timing is associated with maybe a run for another office in this country.
You sit on the Senate Education Committee as well. School vouchers now have been rebranded as education savings accounts. There's a lot of momentum behind getting this passed now. It appears to have support from a number of Republicans, uncertain how it's going to play with rural Republicans, which have traditionally opposed this. Can Democrats influence this at all to protect public schools?
I mean, to the extent, let's be real careful. I don't want to protect public schools. I want to protect kids. Okay. Here's my problem. And I want you to hear me on this. And I think most people agree with me. I've been on the Senate Education Committee for 30 years now. I am a public school advocate, but I am not going to continue to sit by if we have some schools where children have languished over the years in subpar public education environments. What do I mean language? If you have a community that has a school in it where the kids have underperformed over a 4 or 5 year period and nothing's been done by the public school system, you bet I'm going to consider some alternatives. The public alternative is the one I want, but if it's not serving those kids, I can't in all good conscience look at you and my constituents and say that I'm not going to do the best I can in order to provide an educational opportunity.
Do you expect ESAs or education savings accounts to actually pass this session?
I don't think they will.
Why not?
I don't think you have a lot of, the game that's being played is this, trying to divide urban and rural legislators, okay? Urban legislators have worked with rural legislators on a whole host of issues, okay? And if for some reason rural legislators decide to turn their back on urban legislators now, it kind of, breaks the treaty, if you will, between both groups. And there are rural legislators that have already told me that they're not supportive of this particular bill.
Senator, we always appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Hopefully, I wasn't too passionate about those issues this morning.
Senator, thank you for that. This month marks 2 years now since that deadly February freeze of 2021. More than 200 Texans died when natural gas suppliers and electric companies could not keep the heat and lights on across the state. Attorneys had until last week to file lawsuits over what happened, and that has led to a number of lawsuits piling up now. Ian Mitra is the senior managing editor of the Texas Tribune. He is in Austin as always. Ian, good to see you again. Will any of these lawsuits result in accountability for what happened?
I mean, that's the hope. I think the people who have filed these lawsuits, these plaintiffs have basically said, they want to force change. They wanted to make it more expensive to fail, have more of a cost to fail when you don't deliver than it does in preventive. They want more accountability. And so obviously legislators last session, they passed laws addressing kind of aspects of winterizing infrastructure, whether it's natural gas plants or power plants. And there's, both the lieutenant governor and the governor have talked about grid improvements as well now. But, the idea is like from these suits is to bring more accountability and not just, addressing kind of some things incrementally.
I want to ask you about the unemployment rate across the country and even in the state is super low right now. More jobs than there are workers. Local governments, though, have really been hit hard, according to Texas Tribune reporting, especially in small towns.
Yeah, what we're seeing is, and what we've reported on is just the challenges when it comes to local government workers. Obviously there's the aspects of just the continuing impacts of the pandemic. There's the aspect of wages. I think there's a lot of folks who want to work here, but just the wages aren't competitive when they could work maybe on a county level or even in other bigger urban cities. And there's also the aspect of just the aspect of working for the government too. And just there's still a lot of distrust about government, even on the local ends too. And so that's been fueling some of these types of inability to make progress on filling some really, really needed jobs for these communities.
And even in these small towns, it's interesting stories that you guys put together on that. Ian, back to you in just a moment. Thank you very much. Coming up next here, border arrests are down significantly right now. So why does the Texas National Guard want $500 million more? We will ask Republican State Senator Kelly Hancock. And the state of the state, Governor Abbott lays out emergency legislation he wants prioritized and passed. We'll hear from him and the Democratic response from State Representative Trey Martinez Fischer in just a moment. On this week's episode of Y'all-itics, a father from Uvalde who lost his son and the state senator who represents that community on a long-shot bid to pass new laws that might address that mass shooting. This new episode out this morning wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to Inside Texas Politics. State lawmakers can go to work right now on a list of ideas that Governor Abbott declared as emergency items this session. One of the most controversial, though, is likely to be education savings accounts. This is essentially school vouchers just rebranded. There's growing momentum among Republicans to finally expand school choice in the state. But the top priority for Governor Abbott, he said, is one of the main issues for every single elected official in Austin.
As I travel across our great state, one thing I hear loud and clear: property taxes are suffocating Texans. We must fix that this session. Working with Senator Huffman and Representative Bonin, we've all proposed using $15 billion to cut property taxes. Now we must ensure that it provides lasting property tax relief. To get that done, cutting property taxes is an emergency item this legislative session.
That, of course, is from the governor's State of the State address in San Marcos last Thursday night. You know, Texas Democrats do remain the minority here in state government, and they likely will not be able to stop any Republican priorities the governor announced. Soon after the governor's speech, though, we reached out to the leader of the Democrats in the Texas House.
Tonight, I think, was a lot about politics. And in fact, when I closed my eyes, I thought I was listening to a governor from Florida give remarks and not the governor of Texas.
Anything surprise you in there?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, what surprised me is that we had all this theater to not talk about solutions. I mean, I've been in office 21 years now. There are $59 billion in our bank, and you would think we'd use that money to fix things.
You know, Governor Abbott also spoke about the southern border, but something interesting is happening there over the last couple of weeks. Customs and Border Patrol says that arrests are down 40%. Almost simultaneously, the Texas National Guard, though, they want state lawmakers to give it $500 million more for its mission there. So why do they need that money if arrests are down so much? We began with that question with State Senator Kelly Hancock, a Republican who represents Fort Worth and much of Tarrant County.
Senator Hancock, it's good to see you again here. Let's ask the first basic question. Why is the Texas Military Department running out of money?
Well, what we're doing, so we deployed basically $4 billion in assets. But as the numbers continue to climb, we looked for, and we're constantly looking for new ways to address the issue. So we've increased construction of a border wall, which costs more money in the engineering. So we've deployed more projects. And so and as those, as the immigration moves, so we can block one portion of the border in a couple of counties, and then what they do is find out about it and they move to another county. So as these numbers have increased, as that migration has shifted farther north, additional funds were requested, and so we had to make some adjustments there, and those will be addressed this year in our budget. So I think you'll see by the time we get out of here in May that they'll be fully funded.
What would it take for you to feel comfortable with redeploying some of those assets and the billions of dollars that Texas taxpayers are on the hook for down there? What would have to happen for you to say, okay, it's time to move that money elsewhere in the state, or give that money back to Texans in some way?
Yeah, or use it on education, use it on transportation and other things. Great question, Jason. And like I said, that actually came up because at the end of the Trump administration, we were beginning to see those numbers wane, primarily, I believe, from the stay in Mexico. That you had to stay there before
because of COVID, and because of COVID too. Yeah.
Yeah, and but that stay in Mexico policy that allowed us to send them back and let us go through the process on our side. Because I mean, what we were discussing last night at dinner was it's basically a catch and release along the border.
But it's been like that for decades. That's not something new under Biden. It's been like that through Trump, through Obama, Bush years, et cetera, though.
No, you're right, and it is a total federal failure at the federal level, and even to provide a realistic pathway. And so no one, regardless of parties, has been willing to address, which would take some political courage, because everybody has their own answer, and some answers or no answers to address the issue. And what we have are a population coming across with no records released that again, we've only got 15 states in our union that have a higher population than what we've seen come across the border since the Biden administration. 7 million, over 7 million people. And that's the ones that we know about.
Senator, thanks so much for the time. We appreciate it, sir.
I appreciate it. Good to see you, Jason.
Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick have now both identified their legislative priorities. We'll talk about the similarities between their own proposals and what's likely to become law next on the Roundtable.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Ian Mitra is back with us from the Texas Tribune in Austin. Bud Kennedy is here, a columnist at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and Bernadine Steptoe is a political producer at WFAA in Dallas. And Ian, let's start with you. We have now heard from Governor Abbott with his State of the State, laying out his political priorities and legislative ideas. We've also heard last week from the Lieutenant Governor as well. Where are the similarities between what they both want? And I presume the similarities might be the ones that actually lead to law later on this summer.
Yeah, I mean, it really starts with property taxes. I think that's something that both have said very distinctly, very clearly, and very much at the top of their addresses. And that's where they're really going to see alignment. And, I think that's also going to see alignment in the House. They've also both talked about aspects of public education. They've both spoken strong support of some kind of a voucher system in terms of using public state money to use towards non-public, traditional public schools. There's a lot of momentum for them on that. And it's, even though there's been traditionally resistance, obviously from Democrats, but also rural Republicans, but they seem to have a lot of confidence going in that there's going to be something moving on that front as well this session. Bud, your takeaway from the governor's State of the State and things that Lieutenant Governor Patrick have said.
Well, you notice that they talk about the most important things to Republican voters, which are property taxes, and this issue that is cast by the governor is parents' freedom or parents' rights. Now, everybody agrees on including that parents should be able to see curriculum, to decide what books are in libraries, to know what books are in classrooms. Then you get down into vouchers. The governor speaks strongly about that too. And it'll be interesting to see what about vouchers makes it through the House. The governor didn't say anything about drag shows. He didn't say anything about gender surgery. And what's happening now, Jason, is that the governor is moving back to the center, as it looks like he potentially might be a vice presidential nominee. He's trying not to say or do anything that would damage the Republican ticket in 24.
Bernadine, we have said this many times before over the election cycles. What do you think about what Bud said? Is the governor trying to move back to the political middle here?
Well, you know what, probably, but I think he's more so trying to establish himself as someone who's viable outside of conservative, ultra-conservative politics. Because what he's talking about, bipartisanship is almost favorable in terms of property tax. So you're not going to have a huge fight over that, probably how you're going to apply it. And then we're going to get some kind of voucher program. But it might not be as conservative as some of the ultra-conservatives want. But I think at this point, Governor Abbott is looking beyond Texas. Now that could change, but when I listened to his State of State, I was not surprised by some of the things that he said, because he was talking what he wanted to talk, and he put down as emergency items those things he wanted to get done.
Yeah. And you know, Bud, earlier in the program here, we had State Rep Trey Martinez Fischer on too, and he made the quip that if he closed his eyes during the State of the State speech, he said that he thought he heard Ron DeSantis from Florida. Let's talk about 2024 for a moment. Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, the former UN ambassador, she is the second Republican. I want to say the first to run against Trump, but the second Republican in the GOP nomination for 2024. What kind of support might she draw from Texas, Bud, which is the largest Republican state?
Well, looking at the polls, it looks like she has a little bit more support from centrist Republicans, establishment Republicans. She doesn't lead either Trump or DeSantis, but she's a few points ahead of Pence, or of course Cruz is still in those polls too. So you can look for her to be more of a middle ground candidate. I think that either Haley or Glenn Youngkin might look to Greg Abbott for the second spot on their ticket if they're the nominee.
But Bernadine, middle of the ticket hasn't really sold for either party. in the past few cycles.
Well, and they're not your primary voters for the Republican Party. And one of the things that stood out when I listened to her tape, when her video, when she launched her campaign, was the fact she used the word "I'm different." Well, the Republican voters, the Republican primary voters, don't necessarily want different. They want those who think like them, and they want those who they can identify with. So it was amazing. It was interesting to me that she did come out with talking about difference, I guess to set herself apart, but that's not where the primary Republican voters are.
Yeah, I hear that. I think she's exactly right. They don't want different. They know what they want, and some people have said that Republican primary voters are now more Trump than Trump is.
Yeah, it's challenging because you're just also trying to, battle for just trying to get for name recognition and get your name out there too, with so much of the, so much of the attention focused on Trump and Ron DeSantis. I think, with Nikki Haley, she's got a track record of being a governor, and she's also can tell a lot of people that she's worked with in the Trump administration too. So I think she's going to try to highlight various aspects of her time in leadership to try to cater to a broader group.
But again, I guess the question is how successful might that be, not just here in Texas, but nationwide? I fully expect we'll have a number of other people. Just a few seconds left, Bud.
She walked a fine line in South Carolina. A lot of people have brought up her handling of the Confederate flag issue. She's not going to have the hard right patriot movement vote, but she obviously has some religious support. She was had Pastor Hagee making her speech.
Yeah, and indeed, she is a candidate to watch. I'm sure she's not going to be the last one we're talking about this year on the program. Guys, thanks so much for that. We appreciate it. Thank you for watching as well. We're back next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics. Take care.